Okay, now I'd like to get into rhythm. Right? This is the kind of next main topic. Right? And so we've already seen several times that the rhythm of English is often described as being stress-timed because the location of primary stress plays a role in the timing of English speech. Now, the timing of the rhythm is based on the foot. Okay? And that's why we're going to begin looking at the structure of the foot in more detail. Sometimes known as a metrical foot in the study of poetry, or the term stress foot gets used when we talk about grouping syllables for stress. Now, an important property of the foot is there must be at least two rhyme segments, two segments that belong to the rhyme of a syllable. Now, those could be two segments that belong to the same syllable, so a vowel and a consonant in the nucleus and the rhyme of one syllable, that could form a one-syllable foot. But it's also possible for there to be one segment in the rhyme of one syllable and one segment in the rhyme of a following syllable, and then those two syllables form a bisyllabic foot, a foot with two syllables, but it meets the requirement of having two rhyme segments, only that one of the rhyme segments belongs to one syllable, and one of them belongs to a different syllable. But both of them, whether it's a monosyllabic foot with two segments in the rhyme, or a bisyllabic foot with one segment in each rhyme, still fulfills this requirement of at least two segments in the rhyme. Now, any foot, whether there's one syllable or two, can only have one stressed syllable. And this is an important point that we will come back to many times. If there's one stressed syllable, there's one foot. If there are three stressed syllables, there are 3 feet. Any foot, whether it has one syllable or more, only has one stressed syllable. And it may be primary stress or it may be secondary stress, but if it's a stressed syllable, there can only be one in the foot. Okay? And this leads to a range of different foot types, and I'll highlight those now. And they're illustrated by 3 different words. So the word boy, man, and heavy show 3 different types. So boy is made up of 3 segments. An obstruent vowel glide sequence forms a branching nucleus. The vowel glide is a diphthong, oi, produces a syllable with a vowel and a consonant together in a branching rhyme. Okay? Now, that syllable forms a one-syllable foot. And here we use the Greek letter phi, or phi, depending on how you say it, to represent the foot. And this particular foot has just one syllable, so we call it a monosyllabic foot. Okay? Now, in the word man, also made up of 3 segments, also having 2 segments in the rhyme, but this time one segment is in the nucleus, one segment is in the coda. So there's no branching nucleus, just a simple nucleus followed by a simple coda, but there are 2 segments in the rhyme, which fulfills the minimum requirement for a monosyllabic foot. So man is also a monosyllabic foot. In the case of heavy, there are 2 sonority peaks, therefore 2 syllables. Right? Each syllable has 1 segment in its rhyme, so they are light syllables, but still there are 2 together that can join together to form a single foot. So a bisyllabic foot would be one in which there are 2 syllables. And as long as there is a segment in the rhyme of each syllable, it meets the minimum requirement. Right? Now, a syllable with only 1 segment in the rhyme can't form a foot by itself. Right? That would not meet the minimum requirement of 2 segments, 2 rhyme segments for a foot. Okay. Oops. Okay. Now, I'm going to begin ignoring the details of syllable structure. As I start to talk about feet, I'm going to focus on the syllables in the feet. And I'll just expect that you recognize what the internal structure is of those syllables. So a syllable that is marked VC, like boy, is a syllable with a vowel and a consonant in its rhyme. Oh, that's funny. Sorry, that's a mistake. That should say vowel. Well, glides are consonants, so I'll leave it like that. And likewise, the monosyllabic foot for man, right, the VC, indicates that it's a heavy syllable, a syllable with two segments in the rhyme. And then the syllables in heavy each have one segment in the rhyme. Okay. Right. Now, the notation I'm going to use for the foot, I'm going to use parentheses. Okay? And so I'll use parentheses that go around each foot. Okay? So a monosyllabic foot is going to be a syllable with parentheses around that. And that indicates that it's a one-syllable foot. Now, if there are two segments in the rhyme, this is known as a heavy syllable. And as a result, I'm going to change the notation and use the letter H to reflect a heavy syllable. It could be a heavy syllable with a branching nucleus. It could be a heavy syllable with one segment in the nucleus, one segment in the coda. It could be both. It could be a single syllable with a branching nucleus and a segment in the coda. But all of those would count as a heavy syllable. Now, it's also possible for there to be a bisyllabic foot, as we've seen. So there'd be parentheses around two syllables. Right? In this particular case, the example has two light syllables because they each have one segment in the rhyme. And so I'm going to change the notation and use L to mean light. So when you see a parentheses around two syllables, each marked L, it means a sequence of two light syllables. But the third foot type is one that has a heavy syllable followed by a light syllable. So here you see a syllable with a vowel and a consonant in the rhyme of the first syllable, and then a syllable with a single vowel in the nucleus. So there are two types of bisyllabic feet. Those made up of two light syllables, and those made up of a heavy syllable followed by a light syllable. Okay? Now you might wonder then, what about the reverse, right? English, in fact, does not have light, heavy feet. In fact, languages fall into different categories in this regard. There are languages that have heavy, light feet, and there are other languages that have light, heavy feet. English is the first type. Any bisyllabic foot that has a heavy syllable, the heavy syllable must be the first one. Right? There's the sequence heavy, light is possible. Light, heavy is impossible. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean we never have two syllables in which the first syllable is light and the second syllable is heavy. That does happen in words. It doesn't happen in a foot. So anytime I have a light syllable followed by a heavy syllable, the heavy syllable must be a monosyllabic foot, and then that light syllable appears before the foot. And we'll see in just a little bit that words can group together feet with an extra syllable before or an extra syllable after. Okay, so those are the foot types we see in English. And so let's look at just a couple examples. The word cider and the word handle. Okay. So cider is made up of 5 segments. There are 2 sonority peaks. Right? That final glide is higher sonority than the obstruent before it. So this foot is made up of 2 syllables for those 2 sonority peaks. And here I'm introducing a little notation on the syllable. You see the little S and W. In an English foot that has 2 syllables, the first syllable is always the strong syllable, and the second syllable is the weak syllable. So in this case, the strong syllable is a heavy syllable with a branching nucleus, I, si, der. And the weak syllable is a light syllable that has a liquid in the nucleus of the syllable. Similarly, the word handle is also a bisyllabic foot. Right? This time, the strong syllable is a heavy syllable made up of a nucleus and a coda. And again, in the light syllable, that is the weak syllable of the foot, there's a liquid in the nucleus of the syllable. Okay. So an important characteristic of a foot in English is when it has more than one syllable. The strong syllable, and there's only one, the strong syllable will be the first syllable. And that leads to the observation we've made before about the placement of stress. Okay. So in words, we can have a single foot, like boy and man and heavy, which we saw before. Boy and man are monosyllabic feet. Heavy is a bisyllabic foot. But we can also have longer words. We can have words made up of 2 feet or 2-foot words. They could be 2 monosyllabic feet, words like textile, escort. Each has a stress. One of them is primary stress and one of them is secondary stress, but each has a stress. Therefore, each is in a foot. The number of feet matches the number of stresses. Now we have words with 2 feet where one of the feet is a bisyllabic foot and the other is a monosyllabic foot. Words like architect, nightingale, lemonade. In each case, the stressed syllable in the bisyllabic foot is the first syllable of that foot. In some cases, it's primary stress, as in architect, nightingale. And in the last case, it's secondary stress, lemonade. Okay? And we'll come back to that difference later on. And we also have words made up of 2 feet, where both feet are bisyllabic feet. Right? Words like introduction, introduction, and architecture, architecture. So the stress patterns are different because introduction has primary stress on the second foot, and architecture has primary stress on the first foot. But within each bisyllabic foot, the first syllable has stress, the second syllable does not. Okay. Now, in addition to having 1 or 2 feet, I mentioned a few minutes ago that it's also possible for there to be a kind of extra syllable. So there can be a pre-foot syllable, either a light syllable before a bisyllabic foot, a light syllable before a monosyllabic foot. These are all possible. So in a word like aroma, aroma, ro has a branching nucleus. M is a light syllable. Roma forms a foot. And there's this unstressed syllable before it, aroma. Or vanilla. In vanilla, ni-la, there are 2 light syllables. Still, the first one is the strong syllable, so it gets stressed. We get vanilla. Or when the pre-foot syllable comes before a monosyllabic foot, like in canal, canal, right? Only the 1 syllable gets stressed. And notice that in each case, this pre-foot syllable always undergoes vowel reduction. Vowel reduction affects unstressed syllables. Syllables outside the foot can't receive stress, since stress is part of feet. Okay? It's possible to have a post-foot syllable. Right? So in words like, oh, did I include any examples? Oh, I wanted to point out, so we can have an extra syllable after a bisyllabic foot made up of a heavy syllable and a light syllable. We can have an extra syllable after a bisyllabic foot made up of 2 light syllables. And you might consider adding a syllable following a monosyllabic foot, kind of the reverse of canal, right? But in fact, any sequence of a heavy syllable followed by a light syllable will simply be grouped together in a bisyllabic foot. So in fact, we never find a post-foot syllable following a monosyllabic foot. Okay? And words are words like sympathy. Sympa forms a bisyllabic foot, and then the final extra syllable is unstressed. Citizen, citizen, cita. There are two light syllables, cita, cita. Stress is on the first syllable because it's the strong syllable in the foot. And then that post-foot syllable is also unstressed. So you get citizen. Okay. Okay, and that brings us then back to sentences. Right? So stress in sentences may include monosyllabic feet, like a heavy syllable. So in a sentence we've seen before, Anne hates cold, wet snow. Each of those syllables is a foot. Each of those feet are monosyllabic feet. Each, therefore, gets stress. Anne hates cold, wet snow, which leads to a particular rhythm. Anne hates cold, wet snow. Okay? Now, we could also create sentences with bisyllabic feet. They could have a heavy syllable followed by a light syllable, or in fact, they could be a pair of light syllables. So when I say, Annie Stevens teaches very happy children, each of those is a bisyllabic foot. Or I could go to other sentence types, right, or other sentences. Right? Sunday evening concerts often feature famous singers, right, are all bisyllabic feet. But notice there's something similar about the rhythm. Annie Stevens teaches happy children. Sunday evening concerts often feature famous singers. The rhythm of the sentence will be determined by the sequences of bisyllabic or monosyllabic feet. And so the rhythm of the first sentence, Anne hates cold, wet snow, is quite different from the others because it has a different foot structure. So the example of the pre-foot syllable, right, does appear in sentences as well. Right? So Japan is an example of a light syllable followed by a heavy syllable. So only the pan is forming a monosyllabic foot. But I can create sentences with this pre-foot syllable structure. It's a kind of strange sentence, but I'm focusing on the pronunciation, the rhythm, not so much on the meaning. But Japan has had to grow a lot of corn to feed its cows, has a very different rhythm pattern from Annie Stevens teaches very happy children. And that's because of how the syllables are grouped into feet. In fact, this particular structure is known as an iamb. If you've studied in poetry, maybe if you had a literature class where you look at poetry, and Shakespeare, for example, is famous for having written iambic pentameter, which means poetry meter with 5 iambs. So Japan is an iamb, this pre-foot, this syllable, and they can create a particular rhythm. So the rhythm really is influenced by these alternations between different foot types. Okay, I'll stop there and see you in the next video.